Before we begin, a quick note. The opinions and analysis shared on Truth Seekers are our own interpretations of published research and should not be used as medical, financial, or professional advice. Always consult qualified professionals for decisions affecting your health or well-being.
And with that out of the way, welcome to Truth Seekers. I'm Bill Morrison.
And I'm Alex Barrett. Today is January 30th, 2026, and we're talking about vitamin D won't fix your winter blues. Here's what actually will.
Let's get to the truth.
Right, so it's January. It's miserable outside, you're feeling absolutely rubbish, and every health blog on the internet is telling you the same thing. It's your vitamin D. Take supplements. Fix your deficiency. Fix your mood. Bill, I've seen this claim everywhere this winter.
Yeah, and it sounds so logical, right? Less sunlight in winter means less vitamin D production, and people do get more depressed in winter. The connection seems obvious.
Which is exactly why I wanted to look at the actual research. Because when something sounds that neat and tidy, and when it's being sold to you by every wellness influencer and supplement company, I get suspicious.
Okay, so let's break down what people are actually claiming. The headline version is Vitamin D deficiency causes seasonal affective disorder. That's SAD. And if you just boost your vitamin D levels through supplementation, you can basically cure winter depression.
And I've got to say, the media is really confident about this. SSM Health's blog straight up says low levels of vitamin D can increase your risk of seasonal affective disorder. Mental Health of Utah says studies show vitamin D reduced depressive symptoms more than placebo. These aren't fringe websites, these are healthcare organizations.
Right, and here's why it's convincing from a data perspective. Observational studies consistently show that people with depression have lower vitamin D levels. That correlation is real.
Okay, but correlation.
The question is whether vitamin D deficiency causes depression or whether something else is going on.
Right. So, what does the research actually show when you test whether giving people vitamin D helps with depression?
This is where it gets interesting. Let me start with the study that everyone cites as proof that vitamin D works. It's from 1999, led by a researcher named Gloff. They took 15 people with SAD,
15.
15 total. 8 got vitamin D, 7 got phototherapy, that's light therapy. The vitamin D group got a single 100,000 IU dose. That's a massive one time dose, not how anyone actually takes vitamin D supplements day to day.
Hang on. So, the study that's supposedly proving vitamin D cures seasonal depression used a medical megadose that nobody actually prescribes for daily use.
Exactly. And in that tiny study, the vitamin D group's depression scores did improve. But here's the thing, when you've got 15 people total and you're using a dosing method that isn't clinically practical, that's not exactly strong evidence. It's a pilot study at best.
So, what happens when you actually scale up the research and use realistic dosing?
That's where this completely falls apart. In 2020, there was a massive study called Vital DEP published in JAMA. They followed over 18,000 adults for about 5 years. These people took 2,000 IU of vitamin D daily. That's a normal, realistic supplementation dose, or a placebo.
And
Nothing. No significant difference in depression incidence between the vitamin D group and the placebo group. None. After 5 years of daily supplementation in 18,000 people, vitamin D didn't protect against depression.
Huh. So the only study showing vitamin D beats depression used 15 people and a dosing method nobody uses, And the largest, longest, most rigorous study found absolutely nothing.
This is the same pattern we saw with magnesium and sleep, remember? Observational data shows a correlation. Everyone gets excited, and then the actual RCTs come back with nothing.
That's right. Wasn't the magnesium thing the same problem? People who were low in magnesium also had anxiety. But when you give them magnesium,
It didn't work. Yeah, exact same structure. And with vitamin D, there have been SAD specific trials since then, too. A 2014 double blind randomized controlled trial specifically tested vitamin D supplementation versus placebo during winter for seasonal affective disorder. It failed to demonstrate an effect. The authors even noted their findings may be limited by confounders.
which is research speak for we couldn't actually isolate whether vitamin D was doing anything.
Right.
Okay, but here's what I'm actually wondering. If the correlation between low vitamin D and depression is real, and you said it is, what's actually causing that? Because something is connecting those two things.
This is the key question, and it's where the media completely missed the boat. When you spend time in sunlight, three things happen simultaneously. You produce vitamin D, yes, but you also get light exposure to your eyes, which affects your circadian rhythms and serotonin regulation. And you're probably outdoors being physically active, which we know helps mood independently.
So you're getting vitamin D and light exposure and exercise all at the same time.
Exactly. Observational studies can't tell you which of those three is actually helping your mood. They can only tell you that people with more sun exposure have higher vitamin D and better moods. But correlation doesn't tell you causation.
Right, but here's what I find brilliant about this. There's actually a way to test which factor matters, isn't there? Because light therapy boxes exist.
Oh, this is the smoking gun. Light therapy boxes for SAD provide 10,000 lux of bright light. They give you zero vitamin D, none. It's the wrong wavelength. UV light produces vitamin D, but these boxes specifically filter that out for safety.
And do they work?
They absolutely work. The evidence for light therapy for SAD is strong, 50 to 80% response rates in clinical trials. It's considered a first line treatment. Some studies show it's as effective as antidepressant medications.
So the thing that gives you light but no vitamin D works brilliantly for seasonal depression, but the thing that gives you vitamin D without the light, supplements, doesn't work. That should tell you everything about which factor actually matters.
That's exactly the point. If vitamin D deficiency was really causing SAD, then vitamin D pills should work as well as light boxes. But they don't. The light boxes work, the pills don't, which means it's the light, not the vitamin D.
Okay, wait. Let me push back on this for a second.
Yeah,
Because you're saying the observational correlation doesn't matter because we've got RCTs showing nothing. But the RCTs are using daily supplementation, 2000 IU, right? What if the dose is still too low, or the timing's wrong, or there's a subgroup of people who actually do respond? I'm just, I'm wondering if we're being too quick to dismiss the correlation entirely.
that's fair. But here's the thing. If you need some very specific dose or very specific subpopulation for vitamin D to work, that's already a much weaker claim than what the media is saying. They're saying vitamin D deficiency causes SAD in general, not in some people at some doses under some conditions.
Sure, but
And we've actually tested different approaches. The 1999 study used that massive 100,000 IU dose. Vital Dep used daily supplementation for 5 years. Multiple other trials have tried different protocols. At what point do we say, look, If there was a strong effect here, we would have found it by now.
Okay, that's actually quite good. I suppose if vitamin D was really the answer, it shouldn't be this hard to demonstrate.
Right. And the light therapy comparison really drives it home. Those work consistently across multiple trials with large effect sizes. That's what a real treatment looks like.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
And when you look at meta analyses pooling multiple studies, you see this pattern: small effect sizes at best, massive heterogeneity between studies. That's a red flag suggesting the studies are measuring different things or have methodology problems. And the highest quality studies show the weakest effects.
Which is generally not a good sign.
Not a good sign, no.
So, where did the media go wrong in reporting this? Because they're not just being a bit optimistic, they're straight up saying this works.
They took a correlation and declared it causation. Here's a quote from an NIH published review by Penkoffer and colleagues. Exposure to sunlight accounts for over 90% of the vitamin D requirement for most individuals. Since it is possible that persons who are outdoors may be more physically active, it is important to consider whether sunshine alone or in combination with physical activity is related to improved mood.
So, the researchers themselves are saying, hold on, we can't actually separate these variables.
Right. And the review goes on to point out that even for general depression, not just SAD, the evidence is inconsistent. And they conclude that the role that vitamin D supplementation could play in the prevention and treatment of depression has not been studied and should be an important area of future research. That was written in 2010. And here we are in 2025, and the large trials still aren't showing benefits.
But the health blogs are out here acting like this is settled science. Mental Health of Utah literally says vitamin D reduced depressive symptoms more than placebo. And then, buried at the bottom, they mention the Vital Depth trial showing no benefit. Why is that information buried?
Because the headline, vitamin D might not actually help, doesn't sell supplements or get clicks. And here's another problem: vitamin D testing is a massive business. LabCorp's blog talks about vitamin D and SAD, and while they do eventually mention that vitamin D supplementation alone is unlikely to be an effective treatment, that's way down in the article, after they've already primed you to think about getting tested.
It's the same pattern I saw constantly when I was covering health stories. The headline and the first few paragraphs tell one story, the story people will remember and share. Then the actual nuance and contradictory evidence is buried, where most people won't read it.
Yeah, and I think there's something else happening too. When people start taking vitamin D supplements, they often simultaneously start making other changes: spending more time outside, exercising more, maybe eating better.
Right.
Those lifestyle changes are probably what's actually improving their mood. But they credit the supplement because that's the intervention they're consciously tracking.
That makes sense. If you're someone who's thinking, I need to fix my winter depression, and you buy vitamin D supplements, you're already in a mindset of taking action. You might also push yourself to go for walks or sit by windows more or do other things that actually help.
Yeah. And those confounding factors are really hard to control for in studies. But the vital depth trial is important because it's so large and so long, 5 years, that a lot of those confounders should average out across 18,000 people, and still nothing.
Although, sorry, slight tangent here, but I was reading about how vitamin D testing became this huge thing in the 2000s. Like, it went from being a relatively niche test to something everyone was getting routinely screened for. And I kept wondering, Was that driven by actual health concerns or by the labs realizing they could make money?
Oh, it's absolutely both. There was genuine concern about deficiency, especially in northern latitudes. But the testing market exploded way beyond what the evidence supported. And once you're testing everyone, you find a lot of deficiencies, in quotes, because the thresholds for what counts as deficient kept changing.
And then you've got all these people with lab results telling them they're deficient. So, of course, they want to fix it.
Exactly. It creates this cycle where testing drives supplementation, which drives more testing to see if the supplements worked.
Right. Anyway, what were we saying about people making other lifestyle changes when they start supplements?
Yeah, so those confounding factors are hard to control for. But in a trial as large as Vital Dep, with 18,000 people over 5 years, those should average out. And still, nothing.
So, what should people actually do if they're struggling with winter depression?
The evidence is really clear on what works. Light therapy, 20 to 30 minutes in front of a 10,000 lux light box, especially in the morning. There's also cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically designed for SAD, which a 2015 study in the American Journal of Psychiatry found was as effective as light therapy, with the added benefit that the improvements lasted even after treatment ended.
And getting outside during daylight hours if you can, right? Even on cloudy days?
Absolutely. Even cloudy daylight is brighter than indoor lighting. And if you're being physically active while you're outside, even better. Exercise has strong evidence for treating depression generally, not just SAD.
Here's what frustrates me about this kind of health misinformation. It's not just that it's wrong, it's that people might skip treatments that actually work, like light therapy or CBT, because they've been told that popping a vitamin D pill will solve the problem. And then, when winter drags on and they're still feeling terrible, they blame themselves instead of recognizing they were given bad information.
Right. And look, I want to be clear. If someone has a genuine vitamin D deficiency, supplementation is important for bone health and immune function. Vitamin D does real things in your body, but helps your bones and cures winter depression are two completely different claims, and only one of them is supported by evidence.
And the thing about bones isn't nearly as marketable as cure your depression with this one simple supplement.
Exactly. And just to close the loop on the science here, there's a 2014 meta analysis by Spedding that looked at studies with and without methodological flaws. The studies with flaws actually showed vitamin D worsening depression. The flawless studies showed moderate improvement. That massive difference suggests publication bias and methodology problems are inflating the positive results.
Which means even the positive findings might be artifacts of bad research rather than real effects.
That's what it looks like. When you have an effect that only shows up in small, poorly designed studies and disappears in large, well designed ones, that's typically a sign the effect isn't real.
Wait, did you say the flawed studies showed vitamin D making depression worse?
Yeah, well, some of them did. The point is, there was huge variation depending on study quality, which suggests the methodology matters more than the actual intervention.
That's fascinating and kind of damning.
Very damning.
So, bottom line, the connection between winter, sunlight, and mood is real. But what your body needs from that sunlight isn't the vitamin D, it's the light itself hitting your retinas, regulating your circadian rhythms, and the activity that gets you outside. That's what the evidence actually supports.
And if you're struggling with SAD, there are treatments that work: light therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, getting outside during daylight, staying physically active. These aren't just slightly better than vitamin D supplements, they're in a completely different category of evidence.
Next time you see a headline promising that vitamin D will cure your winter blues, ask yourself, if that were true, why do light boxes that provide zero vitamin D work so much better? That question alone should make you skeptical.
And check whether the article mentions the Vital Depth trial. If they're citing tiny studies from the 90s, but not mentioning that the largest trial found nothing, that's a sign they're cherry picking evidence.
Get the light, get outside, move your body. That's what works. The vitamin D is just along for the ride. Right, that's all for today's dive into the data. Just remember, everything we've discussed is our interpretation of published research and shouldn't replace professional medical advice.
Absolutely. If you're dealing with health or mental concerns, talk to your doctor, not just us data nerds on a podcast.
I'm Alex Barrett,
And I'm Bill Morrison
and we'll see you next time.
on Truth Seekers.
Until then, question everything.
But verify with data.